Hello, parents, grandparents, future parents, and curious minds. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steven.
I'm PJ.
And this is
Dad's Discuss.
All right, man. It's been a hot minute.
We had a hiatus there, but for those who have not heard, it is mostly due to the fact that one of our podcasters, Steven here, just recently had himself another baby.
Yes, sir. Mr. Caden just came and joined us in September, and now I'm trying to remember how to talk on a podcast again.
Well, there's a microphone, and use your voice.
Yeah, and there's a stand and a cable.
And a beer.
German
congratulations,
beer.
Steven.
Thank you. Cheers. Another one to the friend group to hopefully have an ultimate team or maybe a football team.
I think we're getting closer to a football team here with enough people even to have both sides.
Yeah. Sadly or not sadly, it's the last kid for us because just the complications of birth and pregnancy and stuff has told us, nah, we're good.
Oh, I understand.
I don't need to deal with it anymore.
You're already ahead of most people, in my opinion. So many people, if they even decide to have children in today's society, they're stopping at one, maybe two. Having 3 children or more is a very high percentage of children compared to most millennials.
Yeah, I mean, it's very scary going from 2 kids to zone defense. At least you can play man-to-man. Right now, it's I have to handle 2 while the wife handles 1 because, I can't do much for a baby, right?
I understand.
Provide warmth, which he does like being warm. And that is interesting that we were blessed with a boy because we could have sworn we were going to end up with all girls. So we'll see how it goes. I worked all that time to adjust to like nurturing a girl. I don't know.
There is a difference.
How the boy's going to end up, yeah.
I may have not been around for Kimber's 2 oldest when they were infants, but I can tell you that having been their stepdad, from toddler age onward, that there definitely is a different parenting style involved when talking about parenting a boy versus parenting a girl. Maybe not when they're 6 months old because there's no personality. But once that personality comes in, there's a difference.
Then you're fighting a being, and until then you're just keeping them alive. Yeah, which in that case, our middle child's almost 2 now, and she's got that personality. It's coming in, and then the oldest is
who she is
getting solidified, and it is great. She is wonderful and sweet and caring, but man, the energy and the focus and attention, I don't know, it's a whole new world, and I'm sure this podcast is gonna definitely have some ups and downs about how we're raising them and how they're growing up for sure.
Yeah, I know it's definitely not all rainbows and candy. There are some days where I don't have much hair, but if I did, I'd want to pull it out. It can be extremely frustrating, especially if you have a toddler who's not happy or excited all the time. So it's just a whole bunch of energy along with anger and frustration.
Yeah, and pushing boundaries and getting in trouble and things.
Absolutely.
Like that. That's a good part about her being such a sweetheart is she's more disappointed in herself and goes and cries and hides and things rather than pushes harder. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I would say so.
We'll see how she goes when she hits a teenager. I hear that's when you worry about the girls more than when they're before teenage.
Fair enough. I haven't experienced that one myself, but I share the sentiment that other people have told me. That's where it usually happens.
Yeah. And, the older generations aren't wrong about a lot of things when it comes to parenting.
Only through experience or trial by fire, if you will.
Yeah. No one can teach you how to raise your kids because every kid's different. But that ties into how we, lead our families, which is the topic for today, leadership.
Sure is, yeah. Glad you mentioned that because I had almost forgotten what we were going to be discussing today.
We're just going to shoot the shit for hours on end. Sit tight. We're going to go for 3 hours just talking about random... No.
Oh, absolutely. No, so leadership, you were the one that brought it up there, Steven. So why don't you, in your opinion or opinions of others that you maybe have talked to or read, what's kind of like your definition of leadership or how you would relate that to being a father?
Yeah, so I have had to read a lot of leadership books and through an MBA program. and through just, trying to advance my career in management and things like that. And it has only been, what do you call it, amplified by the fact that I became a parent, because you realize once you start taking all those courses and reading the books and things that it's essentially parenting in the workplace. And so I think it's a very applicable topic to talk about. And I think a good leader is someone that's gonna act like a parent for anyone they're responsible with. If someone comes in with a hammer and says you're in charge of this group of 10 people, you better flip that switch that you're going to take responsibility for them and raise them kind of like children.
Yeah, I
Not
think
with
responsibility is a good word to kind of drive it home, that leadership is all about your responsibility. You are the leader, you have the responsibility to watch over them, to take care of them, do what you can to make sure that they succeed in life. And I like your analogy of associating it with an MBA, because you can do all the research, but until you put it into practice, it's kind of like going from school into the workforce. You can know all you can about being a leader, but until you put it into practice, whether that be with your own children or with your employees, you're not going to really understand the full meaning of it.
Right. Yeah, because you're not gonna know how to deal with this person or that person, or you'll talk about it on paper, but you don't really get the experience. I mean, even in the MBA course, you did get to build some leadership chops with group projects and things where they would assign someone to be a leader. Like you didn't get to choose, much like in the real world. It was like you're gonna lead this team on this project, or they would ask someone to step up, and so you knew who was more interested in actually leadership and things like that.
That makes sense.
But I want to circle back to what I said earlier to not get myself in trouble. You shouldn't treat your employees like children. I said that you can treat them like you're the parent, but I mean it in the sense that a lot of the parenting, lead by example and have a kind heart and be a shepherd and take your flock through the gates of hell if you need to, and protect them, like you said, and things like that. Fight for the raises, fight for the non-toxic work environment, fight for the good treatment, for lack of a better word, of your people.
I think I'm glad you said good, because there are certainly many types of leaders, and hopefully we can get across in this podcast that leadership, at least from a fatherly perspective and even from a managerial perspective, like you bring up, we hope that you are leading in a good style, a good fit for your children. But there are certainly many examples where one can be in a leadership role but not doing their due diligence and essentially being a bad leader.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not through any fault of a parent out there. A single mother or single father out there has got so much on their plate that being a leader may not be on the forefront of your mind. I mean, you're still exemplifying leadership, providing something for your children, even if you're having to be absent to make money and things like that. But it is a tough world and hard to keep on the forefront of your mind when you're just trying to survive the day to day.
Yep, because it just is another responsibility. As we mentioned, leadership is such a responsibility, but you also have so many other things that go into that. You have to make sure that your children are clothed, fed properly, take them to the doctor, make sure they get the proper education. There's just so much that it involves, and you have to be able to, step up, if you will, and be that leader that they need.
Yeah. And a big part of leadership is delegation, right? That's why I think it's very important to have two people in the home, two parents in the home. I mean, it's not always going to be the case, but if you can, the more people you have, the more you can delegate and lead from, and offload as much of it to the kids too. But I mean, you also got to think leadership, delegating, hey, I can be the doctor in the house. We've talked about that before. You can learn so much and be every role you need to be in the house, but maybe leader's the most important, because I can go delegate the medical stuff to a doctor or a nurse or a paramedic or whatever. I don't have to be that. If I don't, I need to know, every parent needs to know CPR and first aid. I could die on that hill, but those are pretty important things. But aside from that, like, delegation is one of the core competency of a good leader, right?
Yeah, and then also getting your point across to someone who has not, matured, especially with younger children. Like, you can be an excellent leader in your own mind, but if you're not conveying that information clearly to a child, then you're not effectively leading them because they don't comprehend what you're trying to tell them. I know earlier today I had to scold my daughter because she, just trying to play around, but she pretended to try and trip my middle son while we were on the stairs. And I had to remind her, I was like, this, you don't do that. Like, this is very dangerous. So being that leader, informing them that, if they need correction, make sure that they are being corrected, but also understand the why, and that they're not just getting in trouble, but that this is something I want you to learn.
Yeah.
Because, I've been around a couple more years longer than you.
I can tell you what's safe that from my experience jumping over certain objects and things like that.
Have you been running around jumping over scissors, Stephen?
Yeah, that's very true. You gotta be able to communicate on all levels, whether it be a baby, a 4-year-old, a teenager, a kid out of college, which is weird being able to call kids out of college kids.
We were there at one point, right?
Yeah. Or just a mid-level engineer, a senior engineer, or someone in retirement. You got to be able to talk to every level of generations, gaps, and all things like that if you want to be leading in any right.
Yep. But, so I know before we started this episode, Stephen was telling me, a couple traits of a book that he had read on what would qualify as like qualities of a good leader. We've been talking a lot about how to communicate with people. Was that one of the traits, like communication?
Yeah, I believe convincing and persuasive communication style. So yeah, big on communicator. And the book he's referencing is called The Way of the Shepherd, and it's required in one of my leadership courses to read that one. It talks all about leading the people you're in charge of just like a shepherd would his flock. So there's a lot of lessons that I don't remember the author's name right now. I could look it up, but he talked about watching shepherds and sheep and how they get led to where they are and stay safe, and how they're protected from outside forces like wolves and things, and they're very trusting of you shaving them and things like that. And so he came up with 7 principles on the subject, and I guess I can read them if you want.
Sure, why not?
Because they're pretty solid principles when you're trying to lead any sort of group or family.
So here we go then, the 7 principles of being a good leader.
Yeah, at least if you follow servant leaderhood. And 1, know the condition of your flock, so what state they're in health. 2, discover the shape of your sheep, so how they act, work, their strengths, their weaknesses. 3, help your sheep identify with you, so getting to know them, communicating, things like that. 4, make your pasture a safe place, like we talked about, keep the wolves out, the Industrial Revolution out. 5, staff of direction, so guiding them with a steady hand, leading by example, things like that. And then 6, the rod of correction, so know how to correct behavior, like you said, tripping the stairs, and you don't need to be doing that. Have honest conversations. And then 7, the heart of a shepherd, so you need to be someone willing to lead and lead through servitude to others and things like that.
Okay, thank you for reading those off. I know books like that have never been things that I have paid much attention to. I probably should more, but it's always interesting to hear, people's perspectives on different subjects like that.
Yeah, it's good to get outside knowledge because everybody forms their own worldview, right? And I mean, that's why we're part of the reason we have this podcast, right? To talk to each other about some of these hard subjects and let other listeners weigh in if they want to.
Absolutely.
Which we can always criticize them now in the podcast that we need more comments, because I'm only seeing 1 or 2 comments an episode, so we need some engagement farming going on.
Yeah, please. If there's something you want to criticize about me, let me know. I want to know. I'm interested.
Him and his System of a Down shirt are really waiting for someone to fight the system.
I love the reference. Thank you very much. No, at least from my perspective, we, being myself and my wife, Kimber, had talked about having a child together after we got married briefly. And when we made the decision to actively start trying that, it happened really quick. So I wouldn't say that I was so much put into that leadership role fairly quickly, but I do know that some people, especially when it comes to being a father, that it could be the first time you've ever really been requested to be in a large leadership role. If you have never had to be in a supervisor or management position, and then all of a sudden, you're having a baby expected to be on the way, it can really push you into becoming more of that leader and have those leadership qualities that you may not have had to think about before.
That's a good point because, we all have our worldviews, and I grew up in the world of I had to be an Eagle Scout, and so I had to learn leadership at a younger age. But not everybody's had the same life path, right? So you could have glided through life always being led and never having to lead, because usually you get some exposure to it if you want a chance to lead. It's there, right? Like, a band drum major or something, or a captain of a football team or something. But not everybody gets that opportunity because that's what a small portion of any population gets to do those things.
It is, and I'm lucky to have been able to be there for my boys a couple years before we had Luna to help me kind of transition into that leadership and fatherhood role. But especially for so many people that end up having children, say right out of high school, they may have never had that experience before, and then they're kind of thrust into what I would consider one of the main leadership positions that we are expected to be.
Yeah, because parents are the driving force of the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. So if any one of us screws up, no, just kidding. There's a lot of people on the earth. But the more of us that do better, the stronger our nation and our world's going to be, right?
Yep, that's interesting. You mentioned the nation and the world too, and also you were talking about generation after generation. So we recently had an election here in the United States for one of the main leadership positions of the country, the president. And not that the president has any bearing on like parenthood in general, but it certainly does bring up like leadership qualities and questions and things of that nature.
Yeah, who's truly going to represent the nation on a global scale? Because, a national politician in the office of presidency doesn't do much for Huntsville, Alabama, but they do a lot for us when it comes to protecting the nation and driving force of rhetoric and things like that.
Yep, and I think I forget the word I'm looking for, but people sometimes say that, the office of president of the United States is more like the office of the leader of the free world. So it's very, very important position on a global scale.
Yeah. So we had two subprime candidates. One that I think the two of us think is more sub than the other. But everybody knows the results by now. And we'll see how the next 4 years go. But as far as leadership qualities go in the two of them, I don't know on a pros and cons list who would win out. I think I'd have to actually do it. But since we live in Alabama, it's so nice that it's going to be red anyway. So this national office didn't really matter for our vote, but we can have our protest votes and things like that just to show that we're not down with it. And then it was kind of depressing to see on the ballot the positions that matter more to our community didn't have much opposition. It was 90% unopposed Republicans running, so that was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. For those people who may not have known, a lot of these additional positions people were voting for here in the state of Alabama, I would say about 90% of the offices, like you legitimately didn't have a choice. There was only a single person running. But then in terms of the leadership of the country, so the presidential race, I was most disappointed with the results. I will definitely go on air in this podcast and say that.
Yeah, it's looking like the popular vote's getting to almost be a tie now.
Is it? So because it seemed at first closing. That there seemed to be millions of votes that it almost made it seem like people didn't vote as much as last election.
That's because it should be election like mishandling or something in California, because even as of recording this podcast, they've only reported like 70% of their votes,
which is just asinine to me, because we're in the day and age of computers. I don't understand why I click a button to unsubscribe from an email list and it says this may take 2 weeks to happen. No, this should happen in 2 nanoseconds. Yeah. Okay, what are you talking about?
Insane. Like I think they finally called Arizona yesterday, but then like obviously California is going to be blue, so I don't know if that's why they've screwed up their whole electoral system or whatnot.
They're probably counting it by hand or
They're
something. I
probably
don't know. It's
yeah, I don't know what they're doing. But they're not good at counting votes apparently. There was even a meme that was like a picture image of Florida and was like talking to California and was like, "Need me to come count your votes, bro?"
yeah, I
Because
don't get
Florida was the fastest apparently to count votes.
that one. That one does surprise me. Of course, honestly, the election itself, it surprised me. I was not expecting these results, considering one, the turnout we had from the 2020 election, but then two, the fact that we've already had 4 years of a Trump-led Oval Office, and I just don't feel like it took the country in the right direction. But
Yeah.
apparently, the populace of the United States felt different. They had 70 plus million people elect him.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're facing a lot of national political dynamics of, people they vote by how they feel, and this time around, it felt like the current administration wasn't doing enough to alleviate burdens, so a lot of people vote on change, and even if the other candidate is atrocious, they're going to vote for the change candidate. The other thing is, I think the reason I like it in this topic is because on the blue side, Democrats, I don't think Harris had leadership chops or qualities. I think I think she's more of a sheep that's guided and always kind of has been. But I don't know her. I haven't sat down with her. I haven't seen an interview with her where she's like actually open and honest and not practiced and rehearsed. So I don't know. I can't get the right vibes. And we talked about before this podcast that, it's hard to tell people in a category of these leadership styles unless if you sit down and talk to them like we're talking now. But at least what she tried to present to the nation felt like a very, I'm just going to cater to people and even change all my worldview from 4 years ago just to try and win an election. And it was fake and manufactured. And I don't know. I think that's the vibe that lost her, on top of being unlikable. Because that was a whole thing of why she lost the 2020 primaries and the Dems.
I heard she was last place in that, actually.
Pretty much. She got a huge boost from media. Like, she was probably third or something like that in the polls going into voting. And she dropped out of before voting because her polls just like plummeted day after day. And she couldn't even get like above, I think I'm wrong, so don't quote me on this, but she couldn't get above like 7 people in her own state of California. Like, she was that unlikable. And so she dropped out before voting even started in Iowa. And it was just crazy. I was like, okay, I guess I didn't need to learn anything about her, because you remember I was like knee deep in the Dems primary back in the day.
You sure
like,
were,
rooting
yes.
for Andrew Yang and stuff. And so she just pieced out, and I was like, okay, well, we'll never hear from her again. And then somehow she got picked as a VP because Biden did. I don't know. Because there were so many, like, if he was purely going off of the Democratic primary alone, like, everybody above her was, like, great and had awesome ideas and stuff. And then there were other people in Congress that made more sense, too. But I don't know how she ended up. I mean, people will say it's because of, DEI, because he blatantly said before he made the pick that he wanted a black female as a vice president. But I don't really 100% buy that. I think, he could pick whoever the hell he wants. It's his VP.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But in the end, she ended up where she was. Biden was, in my opinion, too arrogant to drop out because he ran on being a single-term president, that he wanted his legacy to be defeat Trump and hand the, keys over to the next generation. And then the day he ran for re-election shocked me. And I was like, what the heck is going on right now? And that's the day I started getting vibes that all this was going to unfold.
Yeah, I definitely think that was a mistake. You're talking about having Trump, who, like I said, I'm not a fan of by any means whatsoever, but has essentially been campaigning for himself for the last 4 years.
Right.
And then Harris, who was kind of thrust into the position and only had essentially 4 months to campaign.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily a fair fight, if you will. But in terms of the leadership qualities of the individual that the country's elected, I just don't see it. And I'm honestly a little bit worried about our future.
Really?
Yep. And only because I have seen what his administration and himself does over a 4 year term. Not that I expect him to live another 4 years, but if he, you know, does go into office and having 4 years of that as a leader for this country, from both a our country perspective and a geopolitical one, I just don't think it's not the best direction if I
Yeah.
were to be told.
Yeah, I could tell you. You know, I'm knee deep in political stuff, so stop me if you need to. I could tell you all about both the campaigns and what their promises and things like that were. And just to put your mind at ease, I think Trump loves himself first and then loves his nation. And then I think it's his family. I might have the last two flip. So I don't think he's going to do anything to screw us up too bad. And I think he's got some pretty good minds behind him. Except for maybe RFK Jr. and Vivek. I didn't get a good read on them when they were running. Vivek seemed like he was too polished, so it was really hard to tell what he was really thinking. And then RFK Jr. is just kind of all over the place. But
You've never killed a bear and left it in Central Park?
yeah, he's got those millionaire vibes for sure. Like he's always been around money and thinks he can get away with stuff. But at least for him, if you listen to him on a deep level, he really just wants, in his heart of hearts, seems like he wants America to like eat natural food that grows out of the ground and live a naturalistic lifestyle, which is near impossible with the population we have, is the negative that I point out. So any vision of that in the future is going to have dangerous consequences down the line to how you handle it. So that's what scares me most, is trying to go that direction and then just screwing up the supply chain completely. But we'll see. That and Elon Musk being in charge of government efficiency scares me
Oh,
out of
yes.
this administration. But everything else is like, they'll prioritize space, they'll prioritize making the US stronger, they'll prioritize a few other things, which necessarily isn't a bad thing
If it actually occurs. I mean, we're
if it
talking about the
occurs.
man who made his own Bibles but then had them printed in China. Like,
Yeah,
that's not America first.
right.
I do think it's really funny. I want you to expand on this a little more. You said you felt like he does prioritize family, but he cheated on his foreign wife with a porn star. Like,
Yeah,
so
well,
why do you think that family is one of his
I just
leadership qualities?
I just get that out of the purely the fact of the interactions of watching him with his current, nuclear family with his wife and stuff. And then I watched was it Lex Friedman podcast with his daughter Ivanka, and she is smart, dude. Like, and she was telling stories about their family and things of growing up and whatnot, and some crazy stuff, but for the most part, semi middle of the road for a family and stuff, and a parent and whatnot.
Really?
So it was a really interesting and eye opening podcast. And he taught her, like, from an early age how to manage money and manage properties and things like that. And it was like, okay, this is pretty interesting, sort of thing. So I mean, he did raise his kids to learn the system and know the system and things like that. So I can't put it past him on the family aspect, sort of thing.
No,
I
I
think
had
he
never
probably
heard
made
that before.
mistakes along the way, and I don't know if, I mean, the way his personality is, being such a narcissist, in my opinion, it would probably be hard to be in any relationship, sort of thing. I'm sure he gets by.
Gets by.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think we've definitely diverted from our original topic, but
I mean, that comes down to leadership.
yeah, I guess it does. I don't know. I personally, I am quite worried about the future. But then again, as all politics are, there's 4 years, and then you move on to the next person, and we look back
Yeah.
on presidents, from 50, 70, 100 years ago, and besides even knowing what their name is, I don't think you could say a single thing that they've done.
Yeah.
So maybe history will just kind of like write this period off, but we're in the thick of it, so we tend to care more
Yeah,
about it.
a lot more emotional state. That's why I love being an independent. I don't have to get emotional about it. I just look into the two parties, figure out which one's probably going to be best for me and my family. And I didn't vote for either of the major parties this time
Oh,
around.
Jaden. I think there was quite a lot of that, even though polling suggests that maybe it was more people just not voting at all, rather than
Possibly.
voting third party, because the third party votes from the numbers I
We're
saw were,
way down.
yeah, very insignificant,
Yeah.
even more insignificant than they usually
Which
are.
perplexed me because I was like, I could have sworn, one side or the other, or both sides were going to go heavier third party, but there's not really a strong third party candidate. I mean, you got the people that have been running for the last like 5 elections that are third party candidates, so it's like, might as well write my name in because they'll get more votes than
Oh, absolutely.
people that have been around forever.
I did write my name in for a position that was unopposed, one of the local elections, just because I felt justified. I was like, I'd rather have at least a choice than I'm voting for myself. But
Right.
the leadership aspects, it does come down to what you personally know, what you've learned in your life, and then what you believe. So,
Yeah.
do you feel like there is potential for people to have different opinions on what a leader is and what a good leader does? Or do you think that's like a central theme? Like someone says good leader, most people think of the same type of skill set.
I think you are exactly right. You can have different leaders that are good for a moment. You don't want a leader that is weak and kowtows to everyone when you're in the middle of a war. But you may want them when you're in good times and you need analysis done and decision making with numbers and being able to utilize relationships more than hardline leadership. So you've got to put the right people in the right places at the right time because there's going to be different types of leaders. You may want that leader that doesn't follow this way of leading as a shepherd and guiding its flock and stuff. You may want one that's very authoritative and directional if that's what the occasion calls for, and then they need to soften up when you get through the hard times, sort of thing.
Okay.
And that's how we are as parents too. I mean, every once in a while you're going to have to take a hard line stance on something, and you're the authority keeping them alive. You've changed that leadership style. I can't guide you anymore. You're not listening. This is how it is. Stop.
Yes, I agree. So not only is there different leadership styles, but sometimes you have to utilize more than one in order to be an
Right.
effective
You
leader.
have to be adaptive, right?
Yes.
I mean, and that's why it's such a fun subject slash role or responsibility to take on, because it's adaptive and you're always learning new ways and new techniques and things like that. Like, we struggle, I'll say, in one area with Anna where she may have a little bit of ADHD. We don't know that she'll hyperfixate on something and we can't get her out of it without yelling at her or grabbing her or something. And that's something I don't like doing. I don't like being that authoritarian dictating things, but we have her in therapy, so more so we can learn another way to handle it. And touching them and trying to snap them out of it is potentially a lot softer than being more aggressive towards the situation.
I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I do. I don't want to be the type of parent that, has to constantly yell or, get in my child's face. But sometimes that's really what it takes. And it is a learning experience for myself as I have to do this occasionally. I would prefer not to, but sometimes it occurs. Does that make me a bad parent? I hope not, but it seems to be the only thing that occasionally will work. And I'm not even sure where I was going with this, but I think it frustrates me to know that I am not always in control, and that I may not have the best solution as the parent figure, as the leader, to handle the situations that I'm placed in.
I like to constantly remind myself that you do the best you know how with the information you have on hand. And you might screw something up. We all do. It's just whether or not your kid needs less therapy than yourself. That's the joke Catherine made recently.
All right. Okay.
So as parents, we're trying to make sure our kids have less therapy than us. No.
Well, right now, ever in my history, I've never taken therapy, so I can't give the kids any less therapy than that.
Yeah. So so that means you weren't messed up too. No. No, I would say therapy is a good thing for just about anybody, no matter if you're dealing with really grief is probably the best or the most impactful thing we have in our lives. So leading someone to therapy after having a major hardship through a loss is probably good because there's a lot to unpack their emotions and stuff. But therapy in general is just it's someone to talk to other than the people around you that judge you on a day to day. So I think it's healthy to get those things out. But now I get to talk to you in front of however many listeners. So
Yeah.
who needs therapy, right?
Well, I do know some people that have been involved with it, and they think it's very beneficial, and that's great. I guess I am more frugal when it comes to that. Like I cannot justify spending the types of prices that therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists ask for
Yeah.
for therapy sessions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable with your mental state and you're getting by and you haven't had too many railroads of throwing you off course, then obviously you don't need therapy. I'm just saying like it can help you be a better person sort of thing because you get things off your chest that you don't get to. I mean, we talked about a whole episode on our image, right?
I think we did,
Community
yes.
image and things like that. Therapy helps you if you have any dark thoughts about yourself or others or things like that. You have a confidential person that you can sit and talk to and work through it and work past it.
That's good. It's good. I think, especially in today's day and age of meme culture, I'm reminded of a meme I saw recently where it said, "How do most men deal with emotions?" And it said, "Well, we just bottle everything up until we have a heart attack at 40 and die like a real man."
Yeah, that
And
sounds
it
about right.
shouldn't be that way. Like, people should feel comfortable expressing themselves and getting topics and anything on their mind out into the open if it's able to help them.
Yeah. And I think that's the power of therapy. I think the downside, the only negative to it is putting yourself in a bubble and trying to define yourself. So if you have a bad therapist that's trying to put you in a bubble and say you're this type of personality and you should do this to correct it or whatever, that's when it probably becomes more of a danger than an asset. But if you have one that's willing to listen and work through and find your way in life and life coach, more of a life coach for a lot of people, help you to, if you're targeting being like a CEO or something and you have a life coach to help you get rid of mannerisms.
Is that a word?
I don't know.
I don't know if it's a word.
Get rid of your habits and teach you manners and things like that, or understand upper class people or whatever. You can use therapy for that.
And essentially, in that capacity, they are then being the leader, like, helping you become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I'll lead people to water. You can't make them drink or whatever.
This is very true. There's only so much that a leader can do. You can't truly change someone's opinion or mindset. You can help guide them to the best of your abilities, but it is up to that individual to be willing to change.
Yep. You can't control another individual, and there's 7 billion of us plus on the planet. So.
Yep. And even down to parenthood, like, you can be the best leader and best parent you can, but your child has to have that understanding, and you have to have that relationship with them to let them know, like, I'm telling you this because I care about you. I'm telling this because I want you to, continue to thrive, continue to survive. You cannot jump into the pit of spiked, rocks. It's not good for your health.
Yeah, right.
So being that leader and helping them, but also understanding that they have to comprehend it, because you can be an excellent leader, but if you're not getting people to understand your point of view, you're not truly having anyone lead you.
Yeah, you're not accomplishing much.
Right.
Which is harking back a little bit to the election is, what drives a lot of the media and possibly the emotion of why people vote. I mean, okay, I have 2 theories about this election, if you'll humor me.
All right.
1, Trump had a vision. He's always had a vision. He's proclaimed that vision. He has diehard followers that follow that vision to make us more of an isolationist nation and make America great again, and bring production and reliability on the U.S. infrastructure so that if we ever have to cut ties or remove ourselves from the global scale, we don't ruin our economy, basically. There was no vision on the Dems other than, hey, I'm going to take care of you through these random piecemeal assortment of things. I may or may not be a copy of Biden. I can't decide if I want to follow in his footsteps or be something different. So there was no discerning change there as a leader, and vision of just piecemealing together little things instead of a forward vision. All she talked about was the main headline was, we're not going back. Well, what does forward look like? Nobody knows. And it's hardly been that any leaders these days talk about world peace. And I think someone on, it wasn't Trump, someone on the Republican side did mention things about bringing peace to the world. And I was like, okay, they're going to win the narrative on vision. And then you talk in response to that, because I don't remember what my second point was other than vision.
Yeah, so as someone who is a registered Democrat in a very deep red state and someone who did vote for Kamala, I agree with your fact that there wasn't a clear vision. You know, this was the second presidential race in a row where the biggest selling point was, we're not them, or they not like us. We are not Trump. And that's great. I think that's great for you. But also, do you have a vision for the future, or is it maintaining the status quo?
Yeah.
And I'd have to agree that the DNC has done a terrible job in recent times, ever since after Obama, who brought that feeling of hope and change, if you will. They just have not had that mentality of, we'd like to push ourselves, progress ourselves into the future. It's, we're not the other side. And that's not going to always work out. So I am clearly upset with how the DNC has been run. And I think a lot of the country is as well.
Yeah. It's the Trump effect, I guess. He's made it all about him, aka narcissist. And so that's all they could, well, I wouldn't say that's all she talked about. I mean, Harris did keep it to like maybe 50% Trump, which was amazing. That was more than almost any politician I've seen today, but it was still in there. She still talked about him quite a bit. She should have if I was her political strategist, I would have ignored the orange guy's bad and just talk about what I see for the future of the nation. And Trump would have lost big time.
I do think so. I think a big part is people just didn't feel like there was an additional benefit to vote.
Yeah.
You know, and I do think that there was less amount of people that came out in support of either candidate this year. As the polls show, you know, not even a whole bunch of people voted independent. They just felt disinterested or disheartened. I'm not quite sure, but just the mentality of not getting out and voting this year, which to me is very surprising, because I do think it makes a big impact. It does make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, at least for how everybody's feeling and energy levels and stuff. There was also a mention online about the potential that COVID, since our last national election was in the middle of it, made it a lot easier to vote.
I've heard
Voting
that too.
access was a lot easier.
Yeah, or people may have been so bored from staying at home that they're like, hey, it's election day, let's get out and vote. Yeah. And that's a very viable theory.
Right, because it was record shattering turnout compared to years past, so catching that same energy maybe was harder. My other theory, which is a little bit more wacko, but hear me out, is that we did have COVID, and COVID was very deadly to people in urban areas where hospitals were being overrun and they couldn't be seen. And where are all or majority of Democratic voters
is in the larger cities.
In large urban areas. Mm-hmm. So maybe a lot of registered Dems passed away during the pandemic, and so when the next national election comes around, there's a lot less voters of them. Maybe not millions, but it definitely can hurt the bottom line when it comes to a basically 50-50 toss-up, because you see all the swing states that Trump won. It was still like some of those states were 1 or 2%.
He
won by.
I was very surprised to see. I think it was actually all of the swing states, electoral college-wise, went to Trump.
Yeah.
I figured at least 1 or 2 may have gone the other direction, but you're right. Some of them were as close as 1 or 2%. I think Nevada was one of them.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And, you know, people have entire podcasts about politics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would like to make it known on the Dads Discuss podcast that I am not a fan of the Electoral College.
Oh, really?
No.
Interesting. I typically ask people what their preferred way to handle it would be then.
Well, if
when I hear that.
we're already going with percentages, like saying, all right, Nevada was 49% to 51, if they have more than 2 electoral votes, why are they not done by the amount of votes? You're giving every single electoral college vote to the person that only won by 2%. They should be split.
I'd have to look at what the math does for that, but maybe it comes out balanced a little bit.
Yep. So we'll just take our home state, for example. We have 9 representatives in the Electoral College from Alabama. Based on the numbers I saw last week, a little over 100,000 people voted for Trump. About 33,000 voted for Kamala. All 9 delegates went to Trump.
Yeah.
Why not 6 and 3?
Right.
You know what happened? You know.
That's where my question comes in. Does that aggregate up to just basically being a popular vote nationwide, or does that actually cause a little bit of a difference to where the states get more representation? Would be my question.
It's going to be my homework, actually. I will do that before our next podcast. I'm going to look at the percentages, look at the number of votes, figure out if the votes were actually split. If each delegate went percentage-wise for each state, what does that do to the total number?
Right, and just round when it's close, like that 1% difference on the 50-50, just give them each half.
Yep. And the thing that got me started on that is, well, I've never really been that big of a fan of the Electoral College, but there is one state that does it that way, and that's the state of Maine, of all places.
Unless did Nebraska get rid of theirs?
If they didn't, it's only because for some reason all delegates did vote that way. But Maine was the only state that I noticed where they had a split.
Oh, they split
amount.
It on percentage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They had 3 of their delegates go to Trump and 1 go to Kamala.
Oh,
but
wow.
all other states, every single one went for that one candidate that won.
I think Nebraska has like all of theirs -1 or something like that. I don't remember.
Interesting.
I thought Nebraska had something weird like that, but I could be wrong. You don't quote anything on this podcast.
Please no. Don't quote anything.
We're just pulling all of it out from our brain. We're not like some of the other podcasts where they have somebody with a laptop in the other room looking stuff up for us.
But also, please fact check us, because I love learning facts, and if we say something incorrect, I want to know about it.
Very true. Very, very true. Because I try and pride myself on not letting something come out of my mouth unless if I've actually at least heard it from multiple sources, rather than just one random guy on the internet saying that it is the way it is.
What if the one random guy on the internet is yourself?
No,
this podcast?
I don't believe that guy. That guy's an idiot.
And we have gone on quite a few tangents. This was a great podcast, though. But in the end, leadership, either from a country perspective, Oval Office, any type of local office, or a parent, is very important. So if it's something that you're interested in hearing more about, or if there's things you'd like to bring up regarding that, please reach out using our socials.
No.
And then, is there anything else leadership-wise that you would like to talk about, Stephen?
Yeah, as everybody can hear, I'm a little bit passionate about it. I don't know, be kind, number 1. Number 2, just listen to people, listen to their concerns, listen to their problems. Don't always have a solution for them. Sometimes just walk with them and find the way together.
I like that, because so many times we hear someone tell someone else an issue, and instinctively you're like, well, I got to help this person try and fix it. That may not be what the individual actually needs. Sometimes they're just looking for, a sympathetic individual to hear them out, or a shoulder to cry on, if you will. It's not always about you trying to solve everyone's problems.
Or just someone to drive them to the place they need to be.
Yeah.
Or walk with them on a beach and kick sand.
And that can be a leadership quality as well, like being the person that you need to be at that specific moment.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. The both of us are still working on it. We will for the rest of our lives. No leader is perfect. I question the people above me all the time, and I beg the people below me to question me as well, kids included. Don't rule your kids out on being questionable. I mean, my immediate mode, if I say don't walk there, and they say, I tell them I prefer you to say why rather than no, because then I'll explain to you why. But at least you're distracted for a second with me yelling or saying don't walk there, and then we can talk about why you don't need to walk there. So,
I like that. I like that. Getting them to ask why so that it can become a learning experience.
Yeah.
I really like that.
So it's taking forever, but I think she's slowly adapting to it. At least the oldest. The youngest isn't quite there yet, but I'm like, don't just say no. Say why. Say why do I need to do that? And then you'll find out why you need to do that, and then you can say no or yes.
That's really good. That is, I mean, everything we talk about on this podcast is certainly relevant, but that's something that I really, really like, and I've not really thought about myself, so I'm gonna take that one away. It's gonna be one of my take homes. Yeah.
Next time Kimber tells you to clean the dishes, don't say no. Say why.
Oh no. Steven over here trying to get me bopped on the head.
Yep. So that's all I got for now. I mean, I could talk on the subject for another hour, but I think we'll leave it at an hour.
Well, we'll have a leadership part 2 and or just go straight into politics part 2. But yes, I agree. We'll certainly continue this conversation, but let you guys take a little water break, and we'll see you next time.
Peace. Thanks for listening to Dad's Discuss.
Please like and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Also, comment any topics you would like us to discuss and share this with your friends and family.
Finally, if you would like to be on the podcast or discuss any topics, please reach out via our contact information below. But yeah. I'll just make it known on the Dad's Discuss Politics. Wow.
Leadership.
We're cutting that part.